You've called veterans America's greatest resource. Why is hiring them so critical for business, and what is the competitive advantage they bring?
The lesson I learned is that if you want to build something great, you don't start with culture. You start with brand as the foundation, and then you build the culture on top of the brand. And so the veterans already understand the brand, right? If you want to be a veteran culture, a military culture, not militant, but military, meaning you want strong leaders who take responsibility, take the initiative, and come with leadership experience included, then we go ahead and brand ourselves as we are a veteran-led organization. And then when they have that brand, we can build the culture on top of it, which is, these are our core values. This is what we believe in. But when you have veterans that, regardless of the branch you served in, that branch had core values. You probably had some creed you said, but you knew what it meant to serve, and you knew what it meant to sacrifice, to raise your hand, to swear, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. So when I can get veterans on the team, it's a game changer because they assimilate to the culture so much more rapidly than their civilian counterparts, because they understand the brand and they understand what's coming and they understand high standards. So veterans are America's greatest resource because not only are they selfless individuals who swore that solemn oath, but they have real leadership experience. They didn't read some silly book or go to some college course on leadership. I met this idiot with a master's degree in leadership. He couldn't lead us. He couldn't lead his way out of a paper bag. He couldn't even lead himself. And I think, gosh, what a waste. I can't believe you spent 2 years getting a master's degree in leadership. You know nothing about leadership. And yet I can go to a private who has never been to college, got a GED, go in there and he can lead. But this guy who has a master's degree in leadership, he can't lead anything.
There's no substitute for real world experience and getting in, rolling your sleeves and doing things. And we talked a little bit backstage that, we're similar in a sense, me and you, in a sense, you're from military. I'm really from college sports and athletic education. And we've both written books. You got a great book out called Veteran Led, which came out in November, a couple months ago. So talk about building things. You built a thriving 8-figure business while juggling the demands of a family. You're trying cases, you're leading a team. What made you decide that right now is the right time to write a book?
Yeah, so actually it was a lot worse before it got better. I came off of active duty, went to law school, and then shortly after, I was a company commander and a lawyer, and I couldn't do both, right? I just couldn't juggle both. And I went to my battalion commander and said, "Sir, I can't do both. I think it might be time for me to resign my commission. This has been great. I had a great active duty experience, federal tuition assistance paid for my law school, and I really enjoyed being a company commander. And I thought that would be a great experience to run my father's law firm." And he said, "Oh, John, don't worry about that. You're deploying with your company to Iraq in about 6 months, so you won't have to do both. Don't worry about it." And so I deployed and I came back. And one of the biggest mistakes I made was we downsized the firm before I left. We should have expanded it, right? So I came back and started rebuilding, and I was still serving in the Nebraska National Guard. I ended up becoming a battalion commander and running the Warrant Officer Candidate School, where I was leading remotely. I had a full-time staff, but I was only there, maybe 1 or 2 weekends a month, and then I would check in and call once a week. But other than that, I was completely, I wouldn't say completely out of the net. I had my AKO email and some other communication opportunities, but it was really tough. And then I remember I get to about 40 years old and I'm like, well, I've hit a lot of my career goals. I wanted to win so many jury trials. I wanted to become a battalion commander, a lieutenant colonel, all these things that I wanted. All of a sudden I'm starting to achieve them. And it's like, what's next? And so I decided I'm going to start growing the business. And I, before I just wanted to be a technician. I just wanted to be a great lawyer like my dad. My dad was a great lawyer, not a great businessman. And so I'm 40 years old and I'm like, well, but I also have to think about, I probably need to, get some financial stability here. I mean, I did not like having to worry about making payroll and that type of stuff. So, and to be fair, my dad's era, law was a practice, not a business. And so I wanted to make sure I was taking care of my team, but I also, what I thought about all the time from the Army was how much I loved being that brand new second lieutenant and had the best non-commissioned officers. And what I loved about it was I was part of a championship team. Now, you and I were both college athletes. Now, I was at William & Mary. I rode the bench. You actually you hit a home run in the College World Series in Rosenblatt. So you played more, but I know what it's like to be on a championship team. And I wanted to get back to that. So I started building that. And I was like, look, I'm going to have champions. I didn't realize how hard that was going to be. And I learned all these lessons and I kept learning them again. And, you make that mistake and, I'm never going to do that again. And then 3 weeks later, I make that same hiring mistake. I make that same accounting error, whatever it was. But there was just things, where I had like team members who didn't know the difference between an expense, right, and an investment, or the difference between a cost and an expense. And so, there are all these, just, it was like we weren't really controlling the back office well. And so I'm like, I gotta capture these lessons. And so I started getting coaches, getting mentoring, joining groups like Vistage, EO, and where I met Candace, CEO Circle, great program sponsor for veterans only, sponsored by JP Morgan Chase and IVMF, the Daniello Institute from Syracuse University. But so I was like, I'm just gonna soak all this in. And then as I continue to learn more lessons, cheap lessons that other people had learned, but tell me in my peer groups, I started capturing them all. And then I tried to build my organization. And then that's why I wrote the book. This was the leadership manual for Barry Law. And as people come to the organization, this is what I hope we continue to do, because we kept doing great things, implementing great practices, and then 2 years later they disappear. Why? And I couldn't figure out why. It was because they weren't documented processes. And some of them didn't need to be processes, but they needed to be captured somewhere. Some of them were not about, the day-to-day business, but were more about leadership and fundamental practices that everybody needs to implement across the organization that we're dropping the ball on.
So I want to get back to the book in a second, but what did it feel like? What was going on inside your head when you first found out that you were deploying to Iraq?
I mean, at the time, my daughter was 4 months old. I was thinking, what am I going to do in the business? Who's going to take over my cases? My dad at this point wanted to basically retire. And so I thought, wow, I have to get it together. And I also thought, though, it was a very stressful period of my life. I was also very thankful. I'm like, man, like, I don't have to come back to this. Like, I could leave. With a train up, it's going to be 18 months that I'm going to be away. Like, I could go do something else. But then when I got to Iraq, I mean, I really loved the focus on the mission, right? Like, at the end of the day, when I was coming home, I was serving in the National Guard, I was a full-time lawyer, running the law firm, business owner, doing everything. And a 4-month-old daughter at home. My wife was at the time was a swim coach. And so it was just, there was so much like extraneous stuff that was preventing me from focusing on the thing that I wanted to do, which is just practice law, just be great at what I'm doing. And so when I was in Iraq, it was, we just focused on the mission every day. Halliburton, KBR took care of our laundry, our food, the logistical stuff. So all I had to do as a company commander was be the leader that my team deserved. And that was my focus. And back then, we had internet access, but it wasn't like I was calling home every day. In fact, I'd call home once a week. And then the problem is some of the other soldiers would call home more frequently. And my wife would be like, hey, I heard from the family support group that so-and-so is calling his wife every day. You're only calling me once a week. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm busy. I'm the commander. I got stuff to do.
Now, for your book, we talked about this. There's like a million leadership books out there. What is the gap you're trying to fill with the veteran-led?
I'm trying to talk to the people who I know how to execute, right? So it's all this heady concept stuff that is completely irrelevant. I'm taking the basic lessons I learned as a 22-year-old infantry lieutenant that helped me become successful, and that I think anyone can understand, but especially the people who have served, right? And because, look, this is a recruiting tool too. I want to hire more veterans. We're 140 people, about 35% veteran right now. My chief operating officer is a former fighter pilot, 2-star general. My CIO is a former colonel, Ranger qualified guy. And so we have, a lot of veterans are throughout the leadership of the team, through middle management, all the way through. But these are the simple lessons that they already know. And so by writing the book, what I wanted to tell my team was, you already know this, but what I wanted to tell the veteran community is, you already know how to lead in the private sector. So whether you want to go, lead a nonprofit, go into GovCon, do something different, do something commercial, whatever it is, like, you have the basic skills. So don't be intimidated. Yes, you're going to have to learn a ton. You don't know everything, but you know that you don't know everything because you're a leader. And that's what I wanted to celebrate that with the veteran community. In our business, helping veterans get disability benefits nationwide. What we do is, if the VA denies a veteran a disability claim, or they underrate them, they don't rate them to the amount that they're required to receive, the percentage under the law, then we appeal that case. And so with over 10,000 clients nationwide, I was getting a lot of calls for people. I was in the story, a lot of it was I was suffering, I was homeless, I wasn't getting medical treatment. And then they get their disability benefits, they get their treatment, everything's on track. And they're like, but there's no team and there's no mission. And with things like PTSD, right? That's why you see veterans can go back multiple combat deployments and they come back, right? And it's like, now they get out and it's like, there's no team, there's no mission. And then everything kind of sets in. And I think, as my dad says, you have to address the dragons during the day so they don't come at night. And I think part of that is finding your team, finding your tribe. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to get more veterans out there. And so like my CEO circle right now, I feel like I found my tribe. Other veteran CEOs, we're brutally honest with each other. And being able to know that we all have great missions and that we're helping people but that we have the support and the team like that. That's so important. And so I wrote the book because I wanted other veterans to know you are the nation's treasure. Like you are the leaders. Like this is what we need. And you have an opportunity to step up and do greater things. And your future should be even greater than it was in military service. No matter what that military service was, whether you serve for 3-year enlistment or whether you serve for 30 years, you are a proven leader and America needs your leadership now more than ever.
So you have tremendous amount of experience learning from the military, to help you with this book. And we also talked a little bit about your dad and what you brought up right there, address the dragons in the day instead of at night. But what other lessons did you learn from your dad from watching him fight for veterans, particularly in the cases like, I think there's a legendary case, the Green Beret affair?
I think my father was fearless, right? I mean, there's a lot of traits that, you wish you had. My father was an amazing trial lawyer, but just like he was not going to be bullied. It didn't matter whether you were a CIA agent or the president of the United States, right? He subpoenaed Nixon, right? Like, no, like
It's amazing.
I'm going to hold you accountable. And my wife's a great trial lawyer and she reminds me a lot of my dad. And actually sometimes they work together on cases. He kind of advises her, but it's like, he was like, what are they going to do? They're going to put the silver bracelets on me, right? For supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States. That's why I'm here. And, I always thought like, I don't want to be a JAG lawyer. I want to be an infantry guy. The JAG lawyers are kind of, in the rear of the gear. My dad told me a story when he was in Vietnam and he's on this cargo plane going somewhere and someone saw his JAG insignia. He said, that meant something to them. Like, you're fighting for us. Like you're one of us. You're fighting for your fellow soldier. And so, I think my dad really taught me how to, be fearless in the courtroom, but also go after what you want. You don't have to justify what you want or who you are. Be who you are. And go after the things you want in life. You only get one life, right? And once you figure that out, it's a lot better because you don't care about what other people think.
How long did it take you to figure that out?
I was about 40 years old. That's when I found out that feedback is a gift. And then I started to realize like I've done a lot of things that I wanted to do. What's next? And I was like, like the book, like, oh my God, like I remember there's a former Special Forces Sergeant Major who's in my group at CEO Circle at the time. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I mean, I just run an 8-figure business. My military experience is not like that impressive. 20 years between active duty and reserve component, but like a lot of people have done it. Like, what's so impressive about me? And he's like, you've done more than most. He's like, write the book. And so, when people you admire tell you to do it, people who have done hard things are like, dude, you've done enough. Write the book. And they start go, so what if people make fun of you? What if, do you care? I'm like, well, not really. People make fun of me all the time. Right. I mean, I really cut my teeth as a criminal defense lawyer, right? Where it's like, you're fighting against, the government and your job is to be a zealous advocate for your client. The government's job is supposed to be justice. Right. And so it's interesting though, because sometimes you're like, look, like these are the facts. Like, why is this case going forward? And they have a different point of view. And that's why I learned like both people can be right. They can be pursuing justice and you may not agree with them, but you've got to stand up for what you believe, even if the other person doesn't believe it. Right. And so it's weird because on the criminal defense side, they're like, oh, well, you're representing, how could you do that? How could you represent that person? I said, because the Constitution of the United States says that somebody has to. Everybody gets one lawyer. And if not me, then who? Right. And if you don't have the brains or the guts to do it, then don't do it. But if you're going to do it right, do it well, because someone put their life in your hands. Someone came to you and said, and it's true that the veterans that we help, the people that are injured in serious car wrecks where the insurance companies won't pay, they come to us and they say, here is my life, my future. Please help me. And that's a heavy burden, but I love taking on that burden because, it reminds us of how important everything that we do in life is.
So you've talked a little bit about feedback twice now. And in John's book, I believe it's chapter 15, you talk about how feedback is a gift. So, John, how do you recommend leaders embrace feedback, especially when it's brutally honest? And let's be honest, it might be things that people don't want to hear about themselves.
Well, Damon, what I found is like, once it hurts, then ask, why does this hurt? Right? Because if you said something to me about like your jacket is stupid, I don't like it. It looks like it's leather. Let's like it's not leather. It's actually really soft. It's nice for the winter. But like I don't care what you think about my jacket. I mean, I want you to like me. I want you to say, John, you're amazing. You're a great lawyer. I want you to want me to represent you if you need help. But if you don't like me, if you don't like who I am or what I do, you don't exist to me anymore. I mean, I can't help you. I can't improve your life. I can't improve your world. If you're going to cut me down and say bad things about me, well, then what I know is that I'm much further ahead in life than you are, right? Because the winners, they don't have time to talk trash about the people behind them, right? And that's what I noticed was it wasn't like anybody I admired ever talked trash, right? It was always the losers or the people who I was surpassing. And so I realized like, you know, feedback is a gift, and the right people who will give you the brutal feedback, if they're doing more than you, take it seriously. They are doing you a favor. But if it's someone talking trash, like they're not here to help you. They're talking trash. It isn't. Their trash talking is not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of them. But if it's someone who's beyond where you're going, and they're giving you feedback and it hurts, I mean, it's a gift. It's like, wow, embrace it, right? They're giving you this brutally honest feedback. And they're where you want to be. And if they are being honest with you, they are giving you such a gift, right? Imagine, I mean, take your pick, right? If Warren Buffett, Damon said, you need to change these three things and said, what you're doing is wrong, is stupid, whatever, change these three things. You might say, oh man, like Warren Buffett doesn't think I'm great. Or you may say, oh my gosh, I just got the greatest advice from the Oracle of Omaha, right? So it's like, wow, someone actually took the time to help me become better. And look, you played baseball. Your coach probably told you, when you're getting coached, hey, your stance is wrong, right? The way you're swinging the bat, all wrong, right? My dad used to say, get your foot out of the bucket, right? Right? All that stuff, right? And coaches, sometimes coaches scream at you, but that's because they care. Just heard Jim Boeheim talk, the Syracuse basketball coach, when I was at JP Morgan Chase headquarters for the CEO Circle. And I mean, hearing him, it's like, look, we all came here to win. Like, we came to win, and we're going to be brutally honest with each other. And if you can't handle it, like, fine. But if your coach is telling you that you need to change something and your coach is more successful than you, then that is a gift. Just take it as a gift. It's not personal. It's not about you. It's about your performance. So don't take it personally.
And I think what I hear you saying here, John, which is really important, is look at feedback as a gift, like you mentioned. And I always think that feedback is a fuel for learning and growth, right? And as a leader, it's so critical that the way you receive feedback is that you model it in a way that you want your team to as well, right? Because if you jump down somebody's throat and you get defensive, then they're not going to give you feedback anymore. And they're also going to get defensive. And it also comes down to who's giving you the feedback. If it's somebody you really care about, maybe you weigh that more than somebody who you don't really care about what they're saying. But at the end of the day, I think if we want to grow and get better, we have to be great, like you're saying, as far as receiving feedback and doing something with it.
Yeah. And I think, it's a really poor feedback when someone says, well, you suck. Okay. Like, that's not helpful feedback, right? Like, okay, what do I suck at? What could I do? But like, specific feedback is so much more important, right? If someone says, look, you look like a slob. Okay, that doesn't help me. But if they say, when you're on camera, you need to lean in about 15 degrees so it doesn't look like you have a gut, right? Like that's great, helpful feedback. But if you just say, I look like a slob, what is it? Like my jacket looks bad. I don't have my collar stays in. I didn't shave today. Like, why do I look like a slob, right? But if you can say specific feedback is, well, you're leaning back like a slouch and you need a haircut. I'm like, oh, okay. I need to make sure I get that done. So like, specific feedback is a gift. But the more general feedback, if someone just gives you general hurtful feedback, they're just trying to hurt you. They're not trying to help you.
And, for the leaders out there, it's also important to realize, back up feedback with facts, or like you said, some specific examples. So that's great. One of the other really key leadership traits that I'd like you to share with us a little bit about in your book is situational awareness. So what What is situational awareness?
Yeah. So as a leader, right, you have to make decisions, but you don't make them in a vacuum. You have to understand the lens by which you observe your environment is crucial. And so if you don't understand what's going around you in your current operating environment, you're going to make bad decisions. So situational awareness is understanding what is happening in your environment right now and what is going to be happening tomorrow. Right. And so, in the military, we would say head on a swivel, right? You're always looking back and forth, because you want to know what's going on. And when we would go into the field, we'd do this exercise that was called SILS, right? As soon as you got into the field environment, you go off into the woods or the jungle, wherever, someone would raise a hand and take a knee. And SILS just means, you stop, you smell, you look, you listen, and you become attuned to the environment, right? And that's really important as a leader, because you got to be able to read the room. You got to be able to read how your team is thinking, behaving. And if you're not aware, if you're not reading the room, if you're not aware of that operating environment, is it high stress? And maybe you just need to slow it down. Or are people too relaxed? And you got to go in there and kick somebody in the ass to get things moving. Right. But if you don't have situational awareness, you don't know. Right. I mean, it's like baseball. Right. Is this the top of the first, or is this the bottom of the ninth? Right. Like, do we have time to come back? Do we have time for a deliberate plan, or do we have to take action right now? And if you have situational awareness, you'll know whether you have the luxury of time to come up with a great plan or whether you need to act right now. And so it's really just understanding your environment, understanding the variables, and being very intentional about that.
Share with us an example of how you've used situational awareness in a positive way at Berry Law.
Years ago, I was trying this case, and I had this, the lead detective was on, right? And this is a criminal defense case. And this guy was falsely accused of a horrific crime. And I'm cross-examining this guy, and it's going well, right? Like, I'm in my groove, and I'm just, and I said, there was something on this at the scene that didn't make sense. And I said, and I just started hammering about all the things that didn't make sense. And I said, and that didn't make sense, and this specific thing, I can't remember what it was, didn't make sense either. And he's looked at me and said, "Sir, there's just a lot of things about this case that don't make sense." And now I had about, 30 other questions lined up, teed up. And I'm like, "Thank you, no further questions." Because he just gave me my reasonable doubt that I was going to share with the jury, right? And so I think, being aware of what's going on in the courtroom, how the jury is looking at me, what the witness is saying, what the witness is thinking, what the witness is feeling, right? Is the judge getting annoyed? Is the prosecutor gonna, jump up and object? What's going on? And it's seeing the things before they happen. And that's situational awareness. And so, for me, I can think of times where, oh wow, on the leadership side in the firm, there have been so many where I've actually made the wrong call. But I think a great example was, I saw a team member who was struggling, and this was a high performer, and I could have tore into them about their low performance. But, I was like, wait a minute, there has to be something going on. And so instead of, blowing up when they screwed something up, I had the situational awareness to think, okay, wait a minute. This is normally a high performer. There has to be something else going on. I'm not seeing the whole program here. There's a missing piece of information. And it was knowing that, and then finding out that person was going through a pretty horrible time, and that I, as a leader, could help them through that time, that they needed help. That they weren't, the low performance was not because they all of a sudden turned into a dirtbag one day. It was because they were suffering, they were hurting, and they needed a leader to step up and to help. They needed someone to say, we're not going to leave you behind here. We're going to take care of you. And that's what they needed. Now, I've also had situational awareness where someone is slacking, and, they need that kick in the ass. They need to know, like, hey, man. And sometimes it's not like yelling at us, just like, man, I know you hold yourself to a higher standard.
So, John, what about if I'm a leader and I tend to keep things on the surface level? What I mean is all work, 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 and I'm not seeing what you just did right there, that maybe there's something else going on behind the scenes. What is one thing a leader can do to get better at that?
Yeah, slow it down. I mean, when you see a problem, and once again, you have to know who your A players are, right? I mean, it's tougher when you have that C player who probably needs to go anyway, right? But if you have that A player and you always see excellence from them and something changes, it's like you just you notice it. Like in your gut, you feel it. And I think there's a great book called The Gift of Fear, which is your conscious mind can't process it as fast as your subconscious mind, right? And so in The Gift of Fear, there are all these horrible situations that people found themselves in where they were almost killed or kidnapped or raped or whatever. And it's all these horrific situations. They all saw it coming and they were able to avoid it. And then in hindsight, they saw all the red flags, but they couldn't see all the red flags in real time. And I think for a lot of us, we just have to realize like those red flags are there. And when we get a high performer that all of a sudden they're not performing at that level anymore, or they're just something off, we notice it. But I think that's our job as leaders, is to be attuned to how our high performers are doing. Now, am I being insensitive to the low performers? Yes. Do I care? No, because my job is to build the championship team. I get the best people because they want a bigger, better future, and that's what I promise them. And so when I sell the vision, I'm brutally honest about where we're going and how hard it's going to be. But I also say, like, I am committed to this, and I'm committed to the point where, as a leader, I will always, always, always challenge you. I will never coddle you, because leadership is about challenging, not coddling. And I'm upfront about that. And so the best players play, and you want the great opportunities, you prove it great. But when I see my best players struggling, before the younger me, the pre-40 would be like, okay, like, there's this guy isn't good. Now I'm like, wait a minute, there's something not right here. What can I do as a leader to help?
So you talk a little bit about C players. Why do you even have them around?
When you're growing an organization, right? Your best people today will not be your best people tomorrow. It's top grading, right? So you may have somebody that was a solid B 2 years ago. Now they're a C. Are they doing the same thing? Are they performing the same work? Yes. But you, as the leader, have raised the standard and you've hired better people. So their performance, which was a B performance 2 years ago, is today a C performance, because you, as a leader, have done your job and built an even better, more high-performing organization. So with raised standards, those that stay the same don't do as well.
So then you got to either coach them up or coach them out, right?
Exactly. And, easier said than done, right? Because it's always, they have a lot of loyalty in the organization. And that's the tough thing about having a great culture, is people want to stay. And it's, hey, you no longer have the skills, or, you're not performing at that level. And I mean, that's the great thing is, if you would ask me, Damon, who my best team member is, I'd say, I haven't hired her yet.
Interesting.
Because as we grow in capability, it's like, that's the person I'm going to hire in the future. So even me, like, I have to grow a lot as a leader to be good enough to run this organization. I mean, I will just tell you, we're an 8-figure company. We're 140 people. I will tell you that by the time we get to 9 figures and are, have 500 people, I'm not the right leader. I am not the right leader at that level. I'm going to need someone who does a little bit more of the corporate speak, does a little bit more of the coaching. For me, it's like, hey, like, I want to be the tip of the spear. I want to go in there. I want to lead from the front. I want to lead by example. I am not the good, and that's my hope, that the organization outgrows me and that I have to step down because I am no longer qualified. That is success. I grew as much as I could, and now I don't have the skills to take it to the next level. And I don't want to develop those skills because that's just not who I am. And that happened in the military. I never wanted to be a full bird colonel. That's why I got as a lieutenant colonel, because the full bird colonels were administrators. I don't want to be an administrator. I want to be a leader.
I think what you're saying, I really appreciate it, because not a lot of leaders understand that maybe that they're not capable of putting their ego aside and saying, hey, maybe if I want to get to this next step, I'm going to have to bring other people in, either learn from them or turn it over to them and go from there. So I really appreciate that you're not afraid to admit that, because some won't.
As we go through this today, I think it's to be an opportunity for our listeners to learn a little bit about what happens when you challenge yourself to try something really new. And we're learning from a learning expert here in Damon in terms of that process, what he's learned since publishing this book, and just kind of the whole process of getting out there in the world and trying some new things, like writing a book. So there you go. Are you excited, Damon?
I'm excited. Let's do it.
I'm going to ask you the toughest question I got right off the bat. No, this is not a tough question, but I'm very curious, because it was a little over a year ago and I found out that you were writing a book. I had no idea. You're already basically done. Like, here's the book. I like to think of myself as your right-hand man here at Learn It. So kind of held this close to the vest. Can you tell us a little bit about what made you want to write a book, and what your process was like, and a little bit about what it was like to write it?
Right. It's funny for somebody that people say love to share everything that goes on, right? uh, this whole process about writing a book, I only told a very few amount of people, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, my original goal was I was trying to get it out by my 50th birthday, which was September of 2023, and at that point, I was going to give it to my mom as a present and to surprise her. I missed that. I missed that by about 8 months. And the other reason why I didn't tell anybody I was writing a book really was because I had a lot of imposter syndrome going into it. And there are certain points where I just wanted to flat out quit and not do it. And I was afraid that maybe people would think it was terrible. And so I didn't want to go out and share with the world that I was doing something and then have to reverse it. So that was really the reason why I didn't share it with anybody. And my inspiration for writing the book was a couple of things. One, my wife, Kara, was fantastic. She really encouraged me to do it. She said, "You're a great storyteller. Get out there and share with the world all that you've experienced through your baseball career, as well as your time at Learn It." Number two, Darren, as you know, I'm incredibly proud of the team we've built at Learn It and what we've done and how we've helped upskill over 2 million people over these years. And so I wanted to be able to tell those stories and weave in a lot of our employees from Carly Lutz to Joe Patty to Delete Lewis, Evans, Matt, everybody. And number three, I think my story is a little unique in the sense that, I didn't get an MBA. I didn't have a bunch of different jobs. What I did have is I played college baseball to a pretty high level, and I played for three Hall of Fame baseball coaches. And I wanted to share my experience of what I learned from playing baseball and playing from these men so that other athletes or people in my position would realize that those kind of skills are transferable and you can really have a great impact. So those were my three reasons really for writing the book.
I think it's kind of fascinating that first off, nice job. I think it's kind of fascinating that you had a little bit of imposter syndrome while you were writing it, and so but you did let people know, because often the advice is you got to let people know or you won't do something, but you didn't let everybody know, which I think is a smart way. You still have some accountability with people close to you and accountability for yourself. But you're writing a book a bit about imposter syndrome, experiencing imposter syndrome while you're writing it. Did writing the book help you overcome some of those feelings of imposter syndrome?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I didn't realize that came out afterwards is how many people deal with imposter syndrome. I would say, without a doubt, the number one thing that people come to me after writing my book, they're saying, "I really resonate with what you talked about imposter syndrome. Can you talk me through your 3-step framework on it?" And so it was great. And I love the fact, Darren, that people would open up to me about their imposter syndrome. Now, to take it a step back, yes, I did tell, my wife knew, and I used some tips on what I learned about giving and receiving feedback as well. What I did was I took there's a gentleman on our team named Nick Silverthorne, who was like my avatar for the type of person that I thought would best benefit from reading my book. Somebody relatively early in their career, who had a learning growth mindset and wants to evolve in their career, whether it's in leadership or just continue to be really successful. And what I did was I would share a section of my book with him, and I would say, "Hey, Nick," and I'm his boss, right? And I would say, "Nick, here's this chapter. Can you read this for me? And by the way, I don't think this part is great." So I tried to open up and allow him the opportunity to give me constructive feedback. And that was super helpful because at that point, then he'd be like, "Yeah, I like what you're saying here, but you need to explain this better or, go in this direction, make it more practical." So that was a huge help for me.
I like that. That's key, because your boss comes to you, "Here's this book that I'm writing," and you're feeling like, "Well, I better say it's great." So you actually made sure that Nick felt safe giving you some actual feedback on it.
Absolutely.
because I think whether it's writing a book, whether it's leading a team, whatever it is, you can't do it in a silo. I think it's really important to be able to have an open mind and get diverse opinions and hear what people have to say. Now, you don't have to take everybody's opinion all the time, but why reinvent the wheel as well? So getting that feedback was a huge help. And, it was also kind of nice hearing from him and Candace Porter, another person who was reading parts of my book. They're like, this is actually really good. Because one thing I could tell you through the process, I was like, man, I hate this. This is it's just like listening to your voice when you're on video. I wasn't sure how it would people would resonate with it.
If we keep talking about this, I'm not going to just discover that it turns out I was the only one who didn't know you were writing a book.
There was a lot. None of my siblings knew, you know.
Oh, wow.
And again, like I said, I'm typically an open book. They were shocked. It took me over 2.5 years. They were shocked that for a project like this, I was able to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's fast forward a little bit to now. You've got the book, you've published it, and since then, just to put this into perspective, you've been invited to do speaking engagements. I think you've done over like 100 podcasts because you've been invited because of the book. It's a bestseller. Um, did this were you surprised by the reaction to the book? And even just what was it like to publish it? Because now it's like you can't control it anymore. The words are out there, the book is out there. Like, what if people don't like it? But of course, it turns out seems like people liked it pretty well.
Yeah, my original goal was just to get it out there and not do anything. I didn't sign up for any marketing package. I wasn't planning on anything. I just was going to put it out there, and then hopefully it would just go away, because again, I wasn't sure what people would think. But then I started passing it out to people on our team, my old baseball coach, Andy Lopez, and people were like, hey, this is great. People can benefit from this. And people were excited about it. And so, I've run Learn It for 27, 28 years, and I've been on thousands of customer meetings and customer calls and internal presentations, but I've never got out there on a stage before and stuck my neck out there. But once I did, Darren, once I did get this out there, I said to myself, I want to get good at this. And the only way to, and getting out there and talking and presenting, and the only way to get good at something is to really put your neck out there and do it. So I signed up with a couple of podcast brokers, and I did about 100 podcasts. And the first 15 of them were close to awful, right? And one of the guests, one of the first hosts I was on was Andy Stork. And I saw Andy at the recent ATD conference, and I told him, "Thank you for having me on your show." Just like a lot of things, I look back, that was one of my very first podcasts, and I've really evolved over time. And it's almost cringeworthy to watch how I did it before. And I'm far from great, but I'm lucky to have people like you have helped coach me over the way. And, for our listeners out there, whether it's writing a book, whether it's public speaking, whether it's taking on a new role, you just have to have the courage to go out there and do it and try if it's something that you really want to do. And that's what I've been trying to do for our team, is to show our Learn It team that, hey, we're all working hard. Some of you are out there making prospecting calls. Others of you are building content and trying new things. Here's my way of contributing. I want to get out there, get out of my comfort zone and add value and share my ideas as a leader, both on a big stage and through podcasting. First as a guest, and now I love doing our show together with you.
Yeah, it's fun. So I think a lot of people don't know this about you, and it's really hearing your story right now. It just seems it really stands out. First off, you write this book that you're not really comfortable doing, but you push yourself through doing it, and you take feedback along the way, and you get a lot of input. And I know you have people like kind of helping you with editing and working on the whole thing. So you're putting yourself in the line of fire there. And then the book is published, and instead of just sitting back and going, "Hey, everybody liked my book," you continue to put yourself in positions that are kind of uncomfortable for you because you're not naturally the person who wants to be, you know, in front of the audience speaking.
Not at all.
What is it with you? What is it with you pushing yourself into uncomfortable situations over and over again? Is this like what's going on here?
Well, it's funny because you say putting yourself out there uncomfortable speaking. I think my wife and my brother especially would laugh and say, "Are you kidding? Damon's the biggest extrovert out there. I kind of feel like I'm an introvert to a sense in certain situations. Uh, but I'm 51 years old. I run a learning company, and one of the ways that I've been able to really enjoy what I do at Learn It over these years is to continue to reinvent Learn It in a way, but also to reinvent myself and always continuing to challenge yourself and put yourself out there. And that's kind of like why I did it, is because I want to keep evolving and growing. And it's like that Gandhi quote that I'm probably going to butcher, but it's in the back of my book. Live like today's your last day and learn like you're going to live forever, right? So even at 51, there's still plenty of time for me to get out there to keep learning and growing. And I want to do that for our team. I want to do it for my wife, but I also want to do it for my kids. Lucy and Wally. I want Lucy and Wally to look at their dad as somebody who's always constantly looking to get better, better, and better.
Yeah. Yeah. You still got that fire.
Still got that fire.
Still got the fire. So, Damon, it's been a year, a little over a year since you published the book. And first off, I think it's really important that, especially as a leader of an organization, you do get out there with your thought leadership, your opinions. And these days, people need to know who you are, what you stand for, what you care about. In a lot of ways, this book was your opportunity to do that, take a position. But it doesn't mean that maybe you feel like some things weren't explained as well as you thought, or that you haven't even learned since this book came out. Is there anything in the book that you wish you could go back and maybe change a little bit, or have your ideas evolved around any of the things that you've written in the book?
That's a great question.
And you could say no. You say, "Oh, Darren, actually, I think it's perfect."
No,
But
no, no,
if
no,
you
no, no,
if
no,
if
no.
you had
Far,
something,
far, far from perfect. I think one of the areas that people really like is around the trust tax, and talk about the importance of getting people the opportunity, putting their trust in them, and going into relationships open instead of guarded. I would have liked to elaborate a little bit more on a professional side around the trust tax, especially around delegating and scaling, because that's a question I get a lot. People will say, "Well, you have these examples of things that didn't work out. Can you give us examples of how you felt more comfortable delegating?" So that's one area. I would have also liked to, like, going into this again, I didn't really think that much about the athlete perspective, about identity. One of the big things about it afterwards was, okay, my first 22 years of my life, I thought of myself as a baseball player, and that was it. And then, my baseball career ended. I pivoted over to Learn It, and I didn't realize that these skills were transferable. And that's something that's really sprouted out of this book, is helping athletes, and not just athletes, but people who maybe were accountants and lost their job and they wanted to follow their passion into something like, I don't know, being a teacher or in sales. I wish I would have elaborated more on how that the skills that you build throughout your career can be transferable, and you need to have the confidence to realize that and go for whatever your dreams are.
Nice. So maybe a little bit more professional, practical advice in some sections, particularly around the trust tax. And it's surprising the reaction sometimes, right? Like there was a lot of interest around the athlete side. And of course, a lot of people really want to hear your baseball stories and things like I still like hearing your baseball stories.
It's funny. I was just thinking about the trust tax. I had people ask me about the trust. I had federal judges to baseball coaches say, "Hey, I've dealt with trust issues, with my clerks, to people on our team." It's just really fascinating how people resonated with it, and hearing their stories around trust, because I think trust is something that's so important when it comes to leadership.
Yeah. So since the book, you've done a bunch of podcasts, you had some speaking engagements and things like that. Any unusual experiences out there on the road? Or I know you had book signings and thing you've done too. What's it been like to be out there, sharing your ideas and any stories from the road? Any stories from the road that you feel comfortable sharing, I should qualify.
That's funny. I would say that it's been exciting, and I've had an opportunity to do a talk at the Naval Academy for a large a group of fire chiefs, senior level fire chiefs, and that was an incredible experience. As well as do a talk out. I got my shirt on, my Atlanta Braves shirt, in center field for the Atlanta Braves, not the players, but the sales leadership for their ticket sales. And one of the interesting things of my stories from the road, Darren, is that a lot of the challenges that organizations have or the goals that they strive for, whether you're leading a large fire department, a sports ticketing team, or a sales team for a SaaS company, a lot of them are the same, and they have very similar challenges. And it was just kind of fun to see how that going through my book would help them address some of those challenges.
Yeah, nice. I love that. I love those pictures of you at the Atlanta Braves. I mean, it's funny because you were actually drafted by the Atlanta Braves when you were like 17 or something. You're like a kid, just about.
Yeah, and I talk about that in my book. And then the Atlanta Braves is, we're really fortunate. They're a big Learn It client. Their ticketing team, and so when I kicked off my speech or my talk, I just said, this is really, things have come full circle. I started off at 17, and I had the choice of going play professional, minor leagues, or down a different path. I chose a different path. And never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd end up in the learning and development world. And here I am, 29 years later, speaking to the Atlanta Braves organization, overlooking the ballpark, about being a learn it all leader. It was surreal, is really what it was.
Yeah. It's funny how you just don't, I mean, you thought you might be there, but not in this capacity. It's like your life just is, it always feels familiar, but totally unfamiliar how your life goes.
Absolutely. It's amazing. It's crazy how things turn out.
It really is, right?
Damon, what else would you like to share with the audience by way of your background, personal context, before we dive on in further?
Well, I mean, we're definitely both on the same page about the importance of learning and leadership. Most of I've been at Learn It for 29 years. We're a live learning platform. Prior to that, I played baseball, and I learned great lessons there on leadership. And that's really where I picked up the importance of learning agility. Because when you're playing sports, you go up to the plate, you strike out, you gotta, sometimes you get feedback, but you gotta take the learnings you have and then put them into practice, within 30 minutes, your next at bat. So I didn't realize it at the time, but what I learned playing baseball was able to carry over to my career. And learning has been not only the services we provide our customers, but a huge part of my life professionally and personally.
Yeah, that real-time learning, that real-time feedback when you're a baseball player. I did little leagues. I'm not athletic. I'm certainly no major league baseball player. I did 6 years of little league. I was a decent fielder, not so decent batter. But I can at least somewhat, on the margins relate. Yeah, batting's hard, and so you go up to bat and it doesn't go so well. Yeah, you are learning on the job, right? You're getting that
100%.
real-time feedback, and so sports is a real great there's a reason why we use sports as a metaphor for leadership all the time, or a metaphor for teams all the time, a metaphor for learning all the time, because you are gaining those skills, and there are all those attributes that directly relate back to what we experience in very real ways in the workplace. And learning, absolutely, there's that real-time feedback that you're receiving. You take a shot in basketball, it either goes in or it doesn't go in. If you're, off to the side or you went too hard, you get that feedback immediately, and if you need to make a correction, right?
Absolutely. And the same is, I believe the same goes when it comes to leadership, because you go in, let's say you either give a presentation or you have a one-on-one, there's always learning opportunities, not only, John, for yourself, but also the team members that you coach. And of course, Learn It does things like we have our, formal learning programs, but there's also, like you mentioned, so many great opportunities for in the moment learning opportunities. And really, that's what I think it comes to, where the intersection is, and what really helps create what we like to call learn it all learning cultures.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the real-time opportunities are fantastic. That's why it's wonderful when we have a dynamic of and a culture of learning where everyone can be a mentor and a coach to everyone else, where a leader, a supervisor sees it as their role to constantly be providing that coaching, that mentoring, and that feedback to the people around them. That's the differentiator, I think, to just have that constant environment of everyone just helping each other and providing that real-time feedback. I'm thinking back to, I don't even remember the details, but there's this really impactful, kind of cheesy video I remember watching back when I was an undergrad student. In like an organizational behavior class or something like that, the teacher shows this video. And it was just so impactful because it was like these blue collar workers down at the dock, and this transformation that happens in this team of these rough, swearing, not particularly well educated, these people that you wouldn't think, on the face of it, just by the looks of it, you wouldn't think that these people would necessarily be like the prime candidates to establish like this learning organization, this dynamic or this culture of coaching and mentoring and constant learning and growth. And yet that's exactly what happens with this team, with this organization. And over the arc of like this 6 months and this year, you see this transformation happening in this like 10-minute video where they're kind of showing how this happens. And I just remember the light bulb going off in my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, if that can happen in an organization like that with that kind of workers, you think about that happening at like a Google or something like that. But if it can happen with blue collar workers, it could happen with anybody. Like you can literally do that with anybody. It's all about mindset. It's all about developing that type of culture where everyone knows that they're expected to learn and grow and that they're expected to hold each other accountable for learning and for personal growth.
I didn't see the video. It sounds great, but I also believe, John, it all starts with leadership. It starts at the top. If you want to create a culture of leadership, you need the senior leaders, the CEO, the C level team to buy into it, and not only buy into it by investing and saying, "Hey, go out and do it," by also participating, rolling up their sleeves, and actually getting involved, participating in the trainings, and making sure that they're giving their team members space to learn. I like to call it learning time off, LTO, right? So it's one thing to just, invest money in it, but it's also making sure that people carve out the time that they have to be able to do training. And then learning outside of the formal classroom, as we were just talking about, the importance of being able to learn, be curious, and try things on the job. And if things don't go right, you got to create a culture that you have a psychologically safe space where
Yeah.
it's okay to fail, right? And people need to know that their leadership has their back. They're either going to be supportive or they're going to help them come in and correct it. Because if people feel like that they're in an organization where they can't fail, well, if they can't fail, then they're not going to take chances. And if they're not going to take chances, they're really not going to grow and they're not going to learn. And I'm sure you feel the same way, I think a lot of the best learning opportunities come from failure. So it starts with leadership. And if you're a leadership team that you think you know it all and you have it all figured out and you're not vulnerable and asking for help, I think you're going to get, for lack of a better term, stomped on and just left behind.
Yeah, yeah. And I think part of that is, we live in such uncertain times, such volatile times, the rapid pace of change that we're in. If we have any hope of being relevant in the future of work, we have to be adaptive, right? And
100%.
how in the world can you be adaptive if you're not constantly learning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at there's studies out there that show that the lifespan of skills now are about 6 months. So
Yeah.
let's say you're a computer science major, you're graduating in June. By the time January comes around, you need a whole new skill set. So how are you going to be able to keep up and continue to learn and grow? Or how are you going to be able to be productive if you're not constantly learning and evolving.
Yeah. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on what with this kind of lifelong learning mentality, this culture of learning mindset, and trying to create that dynamic within your team. What can leaders do to lead in uncertain times?
Well, I think what leaders can do to lead in uncertain times, like right now, for instance, because there's a lot of chaos in the world, right? Whether it's politics or whether it's uncertainty about the market. First and foremost, I think it's really important for leaders to be transparent with their team and communicate as much as possible. Because if teams, I mean, people are seeing that there's layoffs going around out there, and if you're not transparent with your team with where things are at, then people in their mind, John, they kind of make up their own story. Like
Yep.
how I don't know, use Learn It as a case. I don't know how Learn It's doing. Maybe we're struggling, and I think that a lot of times leaders are afraid to be transparent because they're like, okay, well, people are going to get either too stressed out or they're going to quit. What I've always found in working with the customers we work with is that if you are transparent, then people will kind of like you'll see a relief in them. They'll get focused on their job. And I think that that's really where great ideas come from, because they'll all get on the same page and they'll know where things stand, and you'll get ideas bubbling up. People get curious. They'll try to find ways to be innovative and help your company instead of you being guarded. So to me, leading in uncertain times is about being transparent and over communicating. And I was always a big fan of Winston Churchill, and how he handled the Battle of Britain, right? Where he was very honest with the country, what was going on. But he was also, at the end of the day, he was positive. He's like, let's work together and we can get through this. So I think that those are my 3 tips for leading in uncertain times.
Yeah, and I like you said, I see it all the time, and I mean sometimes maybe there are nefarious reasons for why leaders aren't more transparent, why they don't share more, and why they hold information close to the vest. But in uncertain times, I think really oftentimes it's like you just said, they're worried about sharing information that are going to upset their people. That they don't know all the information, and
Right.
so they're waiting to learn more. They're waiting till they have a clear picture to be able to share with their people. I think that's a very common situation. In fact, right now at my home university, we're in that kind of a situation because Utah happens to be like Florida and Texas. Utah happens to also be a very politically conservative state, and so we have our legislature has passed some bills that impact the public university system, similar to Florida and Texas. And so there's some dynamics happening politically that are impacting the university that we're still not quite sure how it's all going to play out. We're not sure what all the implications are. So we actually find ourselves in that exact situation right now. And I can tell you from the faculty perspective, we just want to know, like, we just want some updates. And I don't need to know all the details. I don't even need specifics, and I don't need definite answers. I just want updates. I just want to know, like, what kind of conversations are happening. Is there some sort of a strategy? Just something, I would just love some sort of updates. And radio silence is not what I want. And that's what we're getting, and that's where people then start to fill in the gaps. Like you say, people just start to make stuff up. People start to gossip. They just start to go to the worst case scenario, and people start freaking out. And so in times of uncertainty, leaders may think they're doing the best thing by holding cards close to their vest and waiting until they have something to say. But really, they may be hurting their cause. They may be making things worse. And if you can be a little bit more open, a little bit more transparent, trust your people to have those open conversations, even if that just means, hey, we don't actually really know what the implications are right now. We're exploring this. We're thinking through it. We'll let you know when we have updates, etc. That will go a long way in building trust with your people.
100%. And that's what I was just piggybacking what you said. That's what I was talking about, over communicating. Yeah, you don't have to get into all the details, and there's some things that people don't need to know, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
But I think it's about being consistent and just not going radio silent. And another thing is during uncertain times, it's to have empathy for your team, and maybe even when you can, get together with them on a regular basis and just ask them how they're doing. I think great leaders are also, if you get a group together and just say, what's going on with you? How are you feeling? Giving them an opportunity to speak as well, and open up the floor where they could ask questions. There's just staying connected, I think, is so important during challenging times.
Yeah. And, that empathy piece, I think we need to consider. I mean, especially in this kind of post-COVID world, there was a lot of talk about leading with empathy during COVID. People were dealing with a lot, heightened anxieties, lots of burnout. I think people recognize, yeah, we need to have a lot of empathy during that time. Maybe it hasn't been talked about quite as much since then, but we need to remember that that's still really important. I'm wondering if you see a connection between this lifelong learning idea and leading with empathy, especially in uncertain times.
Well, I think the yes, the members of your team who probably need the most empathy and have a lot of challenges right now are really the middle managers, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because they got the executives who are pulling them in one direction and they're trying to take care of their team, and so they're pulled in both directions. So for senior leaders, you got to have empathy for your middle managers, and that's where the lifelong learning helps out too. It's like help give them some of the skills or that they need to be successful, whether it's coaching or whether it's mentorship. But you got to be mindful of what's going on with them. So I definitely think that there's a correlation between continuous learning, empathy, and dealing with leading during uncertain times. And especially even if your organization is going through downsizing and you're have to let people go, I really believe, John, that's a critical time to invest in learning for your team, because the tasks and the responsibilities, they don't go away. They're still there. So
Yeah.
you have less people who are probably, by the way, freaked out and demoralized because their friends and coworkers are gone. They feel like, things aren't going well here. But if you invest in them in training, coaching, learning, whatever it is you can do, you're helping rescale them to be more productive. And even outside of work, you're showing them that, hey, my organization still cares for me. So I think that that's a way to show empathy as well when it comes to learning. And also it's going to help your organization because, like I said, those tasks and responsibilities don't go away. They're still there.
Yeah, yeah. Your point about middle management in particular, we often talk about leaders having empathy for frontline workers. During the pandemic, we talked about first responders, et cetera. Absolutely. We need to have empathy for frontline workers, customer facing, first responders, et cetera. Absolutely. But yeah, what about middle managers? Get stuck in between, they get sandwiched and they
It's
have so much
tough.
pressure. It's tough. They get so much pressure and they carry that weight day in and day out. And a lot of times they're the forgotten kind of behind the scenes heroes
Yeah.
that really just carry such a burden. And when you talk about burnout, middle managers often carry a lot of the brunt of that because frankly, they're expected to provide that empathy and that compassion and the support for their team, and they don't really have anyone providing it for themselves, right? So that's super important. You mentioned something else. I think it ties directly into lifelong learning and a culture of learning, a culture of growth and development within our organizations, and that really is just having curiosity, like staying curious, having an experimentation culture. And I think if we're having empathy for our people, then we create a psychologically safe place where people feel like they can try stuff. Like when I think of someone who has no empathy or no compassion, they're like so, just like by the book driven, so compliance based, like everyone's just kind of fearful. And in that environment, nobody's trying anything. People kind of show up, they do their work, they're by the book. They kind of keep their head down, do what they need to do their job, and do it well enough that they don't get fired. And they're certainly not trying anything above and beyond because they're just afraid of being noticed. And if they're noticed, chances are something will get noticed that will get someone upset at them, right? Because
totally.
everyone's going to do something that isn't going to be always right. Nobody's perfect, and you're going to mess up at some point. And so if you have empathy, compassion, you recognize that everybody's human. You recognize that everyone's going to, quote, fail. And in fact, you're going to recognize that failure is only failure if you're not learning from it. And so you create this environment where curiosity wins the day. Like, you actually want people to experiment. You want people to iterate rapidly. You want them to try things out. And in fact, the only failure is if you don't learn from what you did. If you try something and it didn't work, and then you just repeat it, yes, that's a failure. But if you try something, especially if you fall forward, fail fast, any of these kind of generic
Terms,
sayings, but they mean something. If you do that, and you're not like losing the company tons of money, but you're trying something that matters because you learn from it and you grow from it, and then you're going to help the company move forward from it. That's what drives innovation, right?
Well, first of all, you said you want them to do that. I disagree. You need them to do that.
Yeah.
You need them to do that. You need them. And I think curiosity is a through line through all of this to come to creating a great learning culture. You want your people to be curious. You want them to try. You want them to go out there, iterate, try, fail, learn. When we bring in, when we hire people at Learn It, or when I'm coaching our customers, the very first conversation I have with everybody is, look, we're bringing you here. And if you're just going to be on a railroad tracks and just head down and just do your job, then I don't want you here. There's really nothing. I mean, this isn't heart surgery. So there's really nothing you're going to do that's going to blow up the organization. So I want you to go out there and I want you to try things. Okay. And if it doesn't work, then it's fine to make mistakes, but kind of like you just said, but let's just not make the same mistake 10 times. Let's learn from that mistake and then make different mistakes, but go out there, do things. And I think that's one of the things. I've been able to surround myself with a great team over the years. And I think that's one of the reasons is because not just me, but my leadership team has given people the safe space to try and have fun. And if things fail, they fail. And also, I think it's important and I don't think it's really failure until you give up anyways, right? Because if you learn from it, then great. But I also think it's important that if senior leaders make a mistake, then just be open about it. Like, hey, I messed this up. This is what happened. And by the way, maybe I could turn to you to help me with it. I mean, I think that it's important to be vulnerable, to have compassion for people. And then it just creates a much more vibrant organization, because when you said, head down and you don't want to get noticed, I mean, that's just freaking miserable for people.
It is for everybody.
It's just miserable. And you're not going to push your organization forward. And the worst part about it is, in my book, it's called A Learn It All Leader. There's learn-it-alls and there's know-it-alls. The worst is the leaders who are know-it-alls. They think they have all the answers, and they're the bottleneck in an organization, right? Because everybody has to come to them for something, and everybody else is afraid to make mistakes. And I think it's just miserable. So I think the human aspects of leadership and what we've talked about today is critical. John, now more than ever with the rapid change of AI and the uncertainty in the world. So you just got to give people a little grace, give them an opportunity to make mistakes, try to make it fun, have patience for your team, and celebrate their wins, and just make sure that they know that you have their back if things don't go well.
Yeah, I love that. I love all of that.
What did you learn from sports that you've been able to replicate in the business world?
I would say one of the most important lessons is the level of relationship that you build among the team, and then the coaching. A coach is always going to keep it real with you. They're going to love you, but they're also going to make sure they correct you and help you become the best athlete possible. And a lot of that deals with speaking the truth in love, giving feedback, but being very constructive in how you can develop. So that was something that was very important for me and how that relates to leadership. Just understanding that feedback is how we grow. And the moment that you stop receiving feedback and stop growing from it, that's when your leadership comes to a halt. So I say that was one of the greatest takeaways. I would say the second thing is the vision, working together as a team towards a vision. Sports, of course, everyone wants to get to a championship, but you meet those special coaches that impart something different. They impart belief in you. And that's something that I strive to do. Any leadership position I'm in is understanding like, hey, I want to do what my coach did for me to someone else, which is impart belief, which kind of goes back to the mission, right? Inspire, motivate, and empower others to reach their potential. And that's essentially what I got from my athletic journey.
That's amazing. What I'm hearing you say there is the importance of feedback and learning from that feedback and creating clear vision. And when it comes to vision, the first thing that I think about is when I was at Pepperdine, where our coach's vision for a little school like that, Hall of Fame coach Andy Lopez, was win the World Series. We're going to win the World Series. And that was just a very clear vision. He got everybody behind it. And it was also, for a school like that at the time, a moonshot vision. And I got hurt, but the next year they won the World Series. But it stuck with me just like with you. Now, going back to feedback, I like how you say that leaders are learners.
Yes.
So what do you mean by that? And why is it important, do you believe, to be a learner?
So I used to say that leaders are readers, but once you have kids, you figure out that reading is sometimes a challenge. So that phrase has changed to leaders are learners because learning is different from everyone. We're going to learn having this conversation. Some people learn through watching videos. For me, it's a mixture of both watching videos, taking notes. But I'd say the most impactful thing with learning is as I am learning something, what is the application? So I try to just tell people as you're learning, find the quickest way to apply. So if I'm reading something and it's talking about the power of recognition, all right, how can I take what I'm reading, listening to, or speaking with someone today and actually implement it? So if it's the power of recognition, they say, hey, what's really impactful is writing a thank you note for a team member or showing some type of appreciation and gratitude. How do I implement that today? And I think that's the difference between gaining knowledge from reading and gaining wisdom, which is just the application of the knowledge. That's when the learning really takes place. So I would just encourage everyone, you can read one book and for that whole year, but if you implemented everything from that one book, you would be better off than someone that's read 100 books, but have not found a way to implement what they're reading. That's what I feel when I say all leaders need to be learners.
Can you give our listeners another example of how, whether you're reading a book or reading a blog or listening to a podcast, how either you yourself or somebody on your team has been able to apply? Because what you said is so important.
So I'll say one of the things that I'm pretty consistent with, even with my team, is there's a morning message. Like my team's know in the morning, Carlos is about to send us something, whether it's on Slack channel, whether it's through a text message. But whatever I'm reading at that point, sometimes learning is teaching. It's just transferring what I've read in the morning and imparting it into someone else and saying, hey, how can you implement this today? So if I read something that's talking about time management, knowing what the priorities are, it might be a simple ask of, hey, team, what's our top 3 priorities today? Or what's going to be your top 3 things? And then the team attacks, and then we can hold each other accountable to make sure, hey, these are the top 3 things that I'm striving to achieve today. And then it's a way that we all can help each other stay consistent towards those goals. I'll say another thing, I journal a lot. So anything that I'm reading, I can take notes on. So if I have a conversation and share something with them, I'm like, hey, I read something that I think would interest you. And I can pull it out on my phone. I can say, hey, this is one of the nuggets that I got this morning. Maybe it'll help you in this situation. So that's another form. And then I say the last thing is there's a pyramid of learning. Anyone can go on Google and look it up, but it gives you the different percentages of how we learn. And group discussion and teaching is among the top ways in the learning pyramid, how people learn and retain information. So anytime that we can have a group discussion like we're having, or do that with our team, and then anytime that we're able to teach something, it's improving the efficiency of what we've learned. So I would say those are just some helpful tips. Anyone that's looking to learn, to share what they're learning, and to continue growing.
I love that. And one of the things that we do at Learn It is I'll find a book I love, and a group of us will all read the book, and then we'll have 1 or 2 meetings, and I'll ask everybody to come prepared to take one insight that they've learned and apply it to how it would help them with their work. and that's worked out well. I'm going to tell you a story, and this goes all the way back to my high school baseball days. When I was a junior in high school, I had a great year. I was a all county. I was one of the top prospects heading into my senior year. There were scouts coming to my games, and it was one of these situations where coming into my senior year, I felt a lot of pressure, and I really struggled for the first 3 or 4 games, and I got down on myself. So my coach recognized that, John DeVos, and we met for breakfast. And so I come in, I sit down with DeVos, and he's drinking coffee, and he pushes across the table this vanilla folder, and he says, kid, I want you to go through and read these for a minute. And remember, this was the 90s, right? And so there was no internet. And so inside was a bunch of clippings from my baseball career. And it was all these things like, I did this, I did that. And then he took them back from me and he said, hey, look, Damon, you're one of the greatest players that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And I know you're struggling right now, but just know that I believe in you. And what he said to me right there, it's stuck with me ever since. And it's the power that leaders, coaches, and parents have to really help people understand the greatness inside of them. Okay? My name is Damon Lembi. I'm the CEO of Learn It. And welcome to another edition of the Learn It All podcast. This is a show that helps today's leaders get ahead and stay ahead of the game, because we believe that great leaders aren't born or made, they're always in the making. And I'm going to share with you some tips today on what you can do to help your team, your kids, or whomever you're working with understand and see the greatness and the achievements that they've made. Sometimes I don't think we recognize the impact we can have by helping people understand the achievements they've accomplished, the greatness inside of them, okay, and things that they've already done. There's so many times that I've had employees who have struggled, right? And maybe they're down on themselves. But if you sit down with them and you share with them some of the successes they've had, if you point out some of the things that they've done to help make them successful, it really brightens their day and helps build confidence, because you know what people want? They want leaders who believe in them. So here's my recommendation, and you don't need to wait until somebody's struggling or down on themselves. Find pocket of times where you can sit down with somebody or call them up and say, hey, you know what? You've done a lot of great things. Let me point out what you've done and share with them these accomplishments. Because a lot of times individuals and team members, for one, they're so caught up in what they're doing day to day that they don't take time to sit back and reflect on the successes they've had. It's your responsibility as a leader to help them really reflect and see the greatness inside themselves. And it can just be as simple as saying, hey, you know what? You did a really great job on this. Look what you've accomplished over the years, and point that out to them. And then from there, take it to the next level and make it visible throughout the organization. Share with the other team members some of the successes that people have had. And I'll tell you, it'll help them build confidence within this individual, and it'll be something that stays with them throughout their career. Just be curious, be mindful, and find times and opportunities to help people feel great about themselves. When you take the time to point out successes people had that maybe they don't either realize or maybe they downplay, you're going to have people who trust you, who believe in you, and they're always going to remember that. It's an impact you can have on people for their entire lives. And I'm going to share one more story before I close out here that is, I think, something that I'm really proud of. About 10 years ago, I met up with Laurel Taylor. Laurel was somebody I worked with at Learn It. She's one of our top producers in sales of all time. And she went back, I think, to graduate school, and she was trying to figure out what she wanted to do next with her career. And we sat down over lunch and we were kind of talking about things. And she was asking me questions. She's saying, it must be so hard to be a CEO, and how do you have the patience? How do you learn to manage people? And I said to her, Laurel, what really surprises me? Why haven't you gone out and started your own thing? And she sat back and she said, do you really think that I can do that? And I said, absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind that you'd be an incredible leader, an incredible founder. And she said, that means the world to me. And I'm not saying, I definitely am not taking credit for all of Laurel's success, but she went out after that and she founded a company that's now called Candidly. Laurel has raised a bunch of money over the years, and the mission of her company, Candidly, is to help crush student debt. And every time I see Laurel, she calls me Big D, and she says, hey, Big D, if it wasn't for you sitting down with me and really believing that I was able to do this, that I don't know if I ever would have went that direction and started my own thing. And it's amazing to have somebody like you, who I respected when I worked at Learn It, point out the greatness in me and the confidence it's given me. So in wrapping this up, I just want to emphasize one more time the impact and difference you can make in people's lives by helping them understand the achievements they've had, that you believe in them, and that people have greatness within them, whether it's a high school baseball coach like John DeVos and the impact he's had on my life, or the story I just shared with Laurel, that you can do this too as a leader and as a parent.
I'm going to ask you to talk about in just a minute. People think they don't need to work on resilience, but they do. And you have a wonderful story in the beginning of the book to exemplify this. But in terms of bringing these things together and why I think this is such a powerful book is because it's not just it's not a simplistic answer. You make it simple. You have a very easy to follow process, but you recognize that this is a process that you need to invest in an ongoing way. I always think of it as like, oh, just eat blueberries and everything will be fine. And everybody wants those answers. You see it all the time in your like news feed. It's like, with 5 simple words, I just got taught an amazing lesson on emotional intelligence. It's like, you need a strategy. And you need a plan, and one that's doable and that you can follow. And if you really do that and you treat yourself almost as your own coach with these tools, you put yourself in a position to develop resilience. And of course, your argument is that that's something you need to start working on today, not in the moment where it's suddenly like, oh my God, I'm so burnt out.
That's right. I mean, it's still, whenever we figure it out, I would say, yes, now is better than any time after now. So yes, now. Yeah. And if we have all the options, yes, proactive, always better. The same way being proactive about our physical health is better, proactive about our financial health. Yes, if we can be proactive, even better. So if we're earlier in our careers, and I'm so thrilled because the book is in some university bookstores as well, so that individuals prior to hitting the workplace, prior to starting their business, prior to all these fabulous things that they'll bring to their professional lives, can consider stepping back and learning from the pain that so many others have gone through, and having these tools. And you're right, I've made the book, actually I have made it on the concise side. Business books are getting even more concise right now. That is where everyone's brains wants to go, and so, which makes it even harder, as we know. Writing something short is actually more work. However, yes, it is concise, so that the reading of it is doable, and the exercises are doable as well. 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
In Alex's book, The Sale, integrity is really the key central message. So Alex, where did you first learn the importance of integrity in your own life? And why do you think that it's such foundational for leadership? I mean, especially in today's world.
It's a great question. And I think to your point about today's world, I think it's kind of something that it's not talked about a lot, because we're all conditioned to, like, if we all looked at the ESPN ticker right now, I bet there would be a story we could find right now live on this podcast that would have to deal with an integrity issue of a player, of course, right? And so I think we're so used to that, and it's kind of rare to be around leaders that do it in a way that is opposite of that. And so I think my co-author John Gordon and I, why we chose this topic is because when you look at leaders that have lasted for the long haul, and you really start to dig into their life and some of the things that they do and the accountability they have in place, or the coaching or the mentoring, you start to unpack like, wow, this person is navigating at a very high level, but they're doing it with integrity. And the root word of integrity is the word integer. So it means a whole or complete number, right? And so when you're around a fully integrated leader, I mean, that's someone who, it's attractive to be around that person. You're attracted to their personality. You want to do work with them. You want to do business with them. You want to be in a relationship with them. That's a person who they don't just talk the talk, but they walk the walk. And I think, Damon, we all when we see it, we know it, right? Like when I've been in Clemson football's locker room, been around Dabo Sweeney. The guy is unbelievable. And when you're around someone like that, you can just sense it. And I think that is the encouragement, for the book of The Sale, is it's a story about a guy named Matt, and he has these I don't know how much you want me to go into the book here, but I
Go
mean,
ahead, do it.
yeah,
Let's do it. Yeah.
yeah. So
I love the book.
yeah, thank you, man. Hey, appreciate your endorsement. It means a lot. But yeah, so Matt is the type of guy that he's very successful. He makes a lot of money. But at home, things are not so hot, not so good. His wife Kendra, she actually tells him, "Look, I'm raising these two kids alone. You're
She's gonna
never home."
divorce him.
Yeah, and exactly. She ultimately says, "Look, if you don't change, like we're getting a divorce, right?" And she says, "I need you to provide." And his response to her is pretty arrogant. He says, "Provide." He says, "I make more money in 1 month than the average person does in a year. Who are you telling to provide?" Right? That's his response. And so things at home are not good, but at work, as you read about, things start getting better and better. And he's in the aviation sales industry, very lucrative industry, and he gets the chance to make the sale of the lifetime. This sale would bring in $72 million of revenue for his organization, which is a lot. I mean, I don't know about you, Damon, but to me, that's a lot of money. So you're a big timer over there. But
No. Hey, I got 2 kids in private school, man. I need the deal.
yeah, exactly. And but the thing is, so $72 million to the company. And if you notice from the front cover of the book, the coin at the bottom, it has the number 7 million. And so that represents his commission he would get. He would get a, $7 million payout for making the sale. But Damon, as you read about, the only problem is that to move forward with the sale, him and his team would have to turn a blind eye to some massive integrity issues. And so the pinnacle of the book is,
Don't give it away. Don't give it away, Alex.
I won't. The pinnacle, I won't give it away. I'm going to keep them all on the edge of their seat. The pinnacle is, does he make the sale, make all this money, ride off into the sunset, or does he do the right thing? And like you said, Damon, we're not going to tell them. They have to buy the book, of course. But it's those principles about integrity that his mentor teach him, that's what I go share about when I go to organizations and do team building things is, look, these are the principles that actually allow you to achieve long-term success, not just one win, but 20, 30, 40 years of doing things the right way and how that can add up. And Damon, I mean, I think you and what you've built in your business is an example of that. You've continually showed up, you do the right thing, and now you're helping a lot of people, which is really cool.
My first experience really with integrity when it came to leadership was when I was at Pepperdine. My baseball coach, Alex, he only had 2 rules. And number 1 was show up on time. And the second rule was do the right thing all the time. And so players would say, well, what do you mean, coach? What do you mean? And he said, you know what it means to do the right thing. When nobody's looking, I know you talked about this in your book, when nobody's looking, you still need to do the right thing. And I think that it's something that always stuck with me. And I really enjoyed a lot of your book, especially when it talked about if you're not doing the right thing, it's hard to keep track of everything. It takes a lot of energy. And so, Alex, but even with all that being said, many leaders struggle with integrity, especially under pressure. Share with us an example, either for yourself or with somebody else in a situation like that.
It's a great question. And that's a great point because no one's perfect. I'm not, you're not, no one is. But one thing that I would say that is, I think, given rocket fuel to my career is mentorship. Finding people who I want to be someday, guys like John Gordon, and getting around those people. Another example is literally one of my neighbors. He's about a block down from our house. He's 72 years old, and he's just extremely wise. His name is Larry. And so every Friday morning, 5 a.m., because here's the thing, we're so busy, it's like, okay, during the day, something's going to come up that we'll have to cancel. But at least, I don't know about you, Damon, but I don't get any invited to any like social gatherings at 5 a.m. So, that
Not
time
anymore.
so that time is usually pretty open for me. So Friday mornings, me and Larry and another friend who we call on the phone, we're talking about life. He's asking us questions, and it's especially like, it's really business coaching, but it's spiritual coaching all in one. And so that's our recommendation, because if you look at any top athlete, they have a nutrition coach, they have a position coach, they have a coordinator, they have a head. And so often in business, we think, oh, I'm just going to build this business, I'm going to do it on my own. You need to have people that are not only going to tell you that you're wrong, but even sometimes more importantly, they're going to encourage you. Because if you know Damon, I mean, in some ways building a business feels like war some days, where it's like you have a good day. I heard Elon Musk say owning a business is like eating glass. It's like every day when you build a business, you're then working with all the big issues that get to you eventually that you have to deal with. And so I think having someone who's older, who's wiser, who has more gray hairs than I do, I'm starting to get a few of them. I just turned 32. He has a lot more gray hairs than I do. That has been huge because we're not perfect, to your point. And under pressure, we will make decisions. But here's what's cool. Him being like a spiritual coach, I actually bring in business, not only ideas, but just situations and get his perspective. And so I've kind of referred to it as, what he calls the business advantage, because it really is an advantage in business when you have someone who he doesn't really have a horse in the race. He doesn't ultimately care on some of the decisions I make, but he cares about me. And so he's willing to invest in me. And that would be my encouragement for anyone, whether you own your own business, you're an employee, it doesn't matter. You need to have someone who's older, wiser, who you're constantly just in communication with, who you can bounce ideas and just be encouraged by. And so that would be my advice, man, is just find that person. They don't have to be an expert. They don't have to be someone famous, but just find someone and that you look up to, that you can trust. And I think that's really helped me in my career.
What is a situation in your own life where maybe you were kind of make a decision around integrity? Like, hey, this is the right thing to do, but maybe you thought about maybe not making the right decision, but you ended up going for it.
Yeah, it's a great question. Because I feel like in some ways we're faced with integrity situations every day almost. I one of my first ever speaking engagements was in 2018. And I remember the CEO of this car dealership, he said, Alex, what's more important, modeling integrity or talking about it? And I paused for 1 second and I said, both. That's the only way I knew how to answer it, because it's like you have some people who just talk about it, but then everyone behind his back is going, well, he doesn't really live that. But then over here, it's not just enough to talk about it, never model it. And so I think something I can think of specifically, I guess, is just like there's been times when I've done speaking engagements where I've gotten like overpaid or and so in that moment you're like, wow, if I kept this, it's an organization paying me, they would never know. But it's those moments of just sending the email and saying, hey, I think you overpaid me, or hey, where now I can rest easy at night, because to your point earlier, I tell people all the time, it's like, even like take a white lie, for example, you think, oh, this won't affect me. This doesn't affect anyone else. Well, it's almost like, imagine, I don't know if you can, Damon, can you juggle?
Kind of, not really. I'm not good.
Okay. So I'm pretty decent. I'm not trying to brag here, but I'm pretty good. So if I had them with me, I would show you. But imagine, a tennis ball is like just one white lie. And I start throwing that tennis ball up, right? And it's really easy to maintain, right? But then I add 2, and this is a demonstration I do when I speak to, companies or teams. Then I get to 3 and I can keep going. I go under my legs, go around my back, do all this stuff.
You are good.
But I say, this is what happens when you, to your point earlier, you have to keep track of all these things. I grab 4 and I can juggle 4 for about 5-10 seconds. But then after that, what happens? It all comes crashing down. And I think that right there is the core of the message that I have for business leaders is, look, you might have gotten away with something here, something over there. You told this person's, but eventually, to your point, it catches up to you, or it's just stressful. Like why give yourself the stress of like, well, I lied to this person, so now I have to remember what I told them. It's like, if you just live in a way that you're like open and you're transparent, and again, no one's perfect, but if you just live in a way that your yeses are yeses, your no's are your no's, and you're transparent and congruent in what you do, I think it's a little easier. I think it's more of a simple lifestyle, maybe it doesn't sound as good when you're out at some event and someone's like, oh, tell me about this. And in that moment, it's really easy. You're like, man, I could make myself sound better right now. We're probably all guilty of that in little ways, but it's like, you know what? I would my encouragement to people is like, just next time you get in that conversation, just see how it goes when you kind of just don't make yourself sound as good. And I think that's just a practice of humility, and not to talk bad about yourself, but it's just like, I don't want to try to even position myself to act like I'm someone who I'm not, because it's like, so
it is a good answer.